Okay, so if I were to ask you to close your eyes and picture the ultimate rock star, the absolute blueprint for that chaotic, bad boy celebrity who pops into your head.
You're probably thinking of the 1970s, right?
Exactly. You know, maybe Keith Richards with a cigarette dangling from his lip, or Jim Morrison in leather pants reciting poetry to a whole stadium.
You think of someone talented, sure, but also dangerous. Someone who lives right on the edge of what's considered acceptable behavior.
Right. We expect the genius, but we also kind of expect the drugs, the scandals, the entourage.
And tragically, often the early death.
Mm.
It's an archetype we've become really comfortable with.
It is. But here's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
What if I told you the original prototype for that entire lifestyle? He wasn't holding a Fender Stratocaster?
He was holding a quill pen.
A quill pen. We are talking about a guy who was so committed to being a rebel that when his college band pet dogs, he went out and bought a tame bear just spite the administration.
And we're not even at the skull drinking part yet.
Allegedly. We have to say allegedly. But a man who died fighting a war for a country he wasn't even a citizen of.
We are, of course, talking about Lord Byron, George Gordon Byron, the man whom Lady Caroline Lamb famously described as
mad, bad, and dangerous to know.
That is the brand slogan, isn't it? It's legendary.
It is. But what I love about this deep dive is that when you peel back the layers of that myth, mad, bad, and dangerous, almost feels like a massive understatement.
It really does.
So today, we're not just looking at a poet. We are looking at the invention of the Byronic hero. We're going to unpack the scandals that would get him canceled 10 times over today, his surprisingly radical politics, his crippling insecurities, and, well, the redemption arc that ended in Greece.
And we have to properly frame the scale of his fame. This wasn't just literary appreciation. This was Byromania.
Byromania. That sounds like a frantic fan club.
It was. I mean, it was comparable to Beatlemania or the height of Michael Jackson's fame. People didn't just read his work, they consumed his life.
They wore collars like him, they tried to look moody like him, that kind of thing.
Exactly. He was the first modern celebrity in the sense that the persona eventually sort of eclipsed the work itself.
So our mission today is to separate the man from the myth, or maybe to see how he deliberately blurred those lines himself.
And to understand the man, we can't really start with his poetry. We have to start with his genetics. Because with Byron, the wickedness wasn't just a choice, it was practically an inheritance.
The Byron family tree it reads like a script for a Gothic horror series.
It really does.
He was born George Gordon Byron in 1788, and the cast of characters that came before him is just unbelievable. You've got his father, Captain John Byron.
Known to history as Mad Jack.
Mad Jack. You know you're in for a rough childhood when your dad's nickname implies insanity.
Mad Jack was a piece of work. He was a remarkably handsome man, an officer, but he had, let's say, reckless disregard for money and for people.
He married for money, right?
He essentially seduced women for their fortunes. He married Byron's mother, Catherine Gordon, who was a Scottish heiress with a really significant estate.
And he didn't stick around for the domestic bliss, did he?
No, but he stuck around long enough to spend the money. In the space of just 2 years, Mad Jack managed to squander Catherine's entire fortune.
How much are we talking?
We're talking about £23,500. In today's economy, that is millions of pounds.
Yeah.
Just gone.
So he bankrupts the family.
Completely.
Yeah.
He fled to France to escape his creditors and died there, possibly by suicide, when Byron was just a toddler.
Wow.
He left Catherine and little George with the title, but absolutely no money to support it. And then on the other side of the family, you have the grandfather, Vice Admiral John Byron.
Foul weather Jack.
Yes. He was a naval officer who had this uncanny, almost supernatural bad luck at sea. Every time he boarded a ship, he'd run into a hurricane or a shipwreck. It became a naval superstition.
And then there's the great uncle.
The wicked Lord Byron, the 5th Baron.
This guy sounds like a movie villain.
He was a recluse who killed a neighbor in a duel and then spent his final years in the ancestral home, Newstead Abbey, basically letting it rot around him. He stripped the forest for cash, he killed a deer, he hated his son and grandson, so he tried to ruin the estate so they would inherit nothing.
That is so petty. I'm going to ruin this house just so you can't enjoy it.
Exactly. So when the wicked lord dies in 1798, our George becomes the 6th Baron Byron. He's 10 years old.
He's a lord, but it's a poison chalice.
Absolutely. He inherits the title, which gives him status, but he also inherits Newstead Abbey, which is this Gothic ruin with a leaky roof and no money to fix it. So you have this boy who is technically nobility, but he's living in poverty.
And living with a mother who is well, emotionally shattered from her experience with Mad Jack.
Right, and that dynamic with his mother, Catherine, is crucial, isn't it? Because we have to talk about the physical reality of Byron. He wasn't just dealing with a crazy family tree.
He was dealing with a physical disability that defined his entire psychology.
This is the key to unlocking Byron. He was born with a deformity of the right foot. Medical historians have argued for years about whether it was a clubfoot or maybe a result of polio or dysplasia.
But the result was a noticeable limp.
A very noticeable limp. His heel was drawn up. And for a man who had become known for his vanity, that must have been torture.
He called himself Le Diable Boiteux.
Right, the limping devil.
Yeah.
It was a source of profound shame. And his mother made it worse.
How so?
Catherine Gordon was a woman of extreme volatility, likely from her own trauma, but she would lash out at him.
There's that specific anecdote where she mocks him for it?
Yes, in a fit of temper, she called him a lame brat. Imagine the psychological scar that leaves on a child. He was already sensitive, and the one person who's supposed to protect him uses his biggest insecurity as a weapon.
It explains so much of his later behavior, that constant need to prove himself.
And the physical trauma wasn't just verbal. In the late 18th century, orthopedic medicine was, frankly, barbaric. He was subjected to these incredibly painful treatments.
Wrenches, braces.
Yeah, wooden braces screwed into his foot to try and force it straight. It was agony, and it was completely pointless.
So he compensates. He decides, if I can't walk perfectly, I'm going to be stronger than everyone else.
Precisely. He developed this unique sliding walk. He would move on the balls of his feet to disguise the limp, so he'd appear to almost glide into a room.
He turned a bug into a feature. He made it cool.
He did. It became part of his spooky charisma. But more than that, he threw himself into violent physical exercise. He became a boxer. He was an excellent swimmer. He rode horses obsessively. He was constantly saying to the world, look at what this body can do. Do not pity me.
That drive takes him to Harrow, one of those elite British boarding schools.
And he was an undistinguished student academically. He wasn't top of the class, but he was emotionally dominant.
He formed what he called violent friendships.
Yes, passions, he called them. His attachments to other boys were incredibly intense. This is where we start to see his romantic nature, which wasn't really limited by gender. And then he goes to Trinity College, Cambridge. And this is where we get my absolute favorite story in the entire Byron archive.
But the bear.
The bear.
It is the ultimate anecdote. So Byron arrives at Cambridge, and he wants to bring his beloved bulldog, but he reads the statutes of the college, and they strictly forbid students from keeping pet dogs.
Most people would just, hide the dog or get a cat.
Byron is not most people. He read the rules with a lawyer's eye, and noticed that while dogs were explicitly banned, the statutes said absolutely nothing about bears.
No.
So he purchased a tame bear, brought it to his dorm, and chained it up. When the college authorities were outraged and told him to remove it, he simply held up the rule book and said, show me where it says no bears.
And he didn't stop there, did he? He had plans for the bear.
He delighted in the absurdity of it. He told his friends that since the bear was clearly a creature of refinement, he intended to apply for the bear to sit for a fellowship.
He was trolling the faculty. He was implying the bear might make a better academic than the professors. It's pure rock star behavior. It's 1805, and he's doing performance art. Oh, you have rules. I have a bear. It shows that wit, that arrogance, and that deep desire to shock people.
It does. But amidst all that, the gambling, the boxing, the bear-keeping Cambridge was also where he experienced one of his most significant heartbreaks.
John Edelston.
The choir boy. This was the pure love, right?
Yes. Byron is 2 years older. He saved Edelston from drowning at one point, and they formed this intense bond. Byron called it a violent though pure love and passion. When Edelston died young a few years later, Byron was devastated. He wrote the Thyrza elegies for him.
It shows that beneath that cynical, arrogant exterior he was building, he had this incredibly fragile, romantic heart.
Absolutely.
So he leaves Cambridge. He's got the title, the debt, the broken heart. And like any wealthy-ish young man of the Regency era, he goes on a gap year, the Grand Tour.
But this wasn't the standard Grand Tour. Usually a young lord would go to Paris, then Rome, look at some art, and come home. But the Napoleonic Wars were raging.
Right, Europe was a war zone.
Yeah. So Byron had to go further afield. He went to the Mediterranean, Portugal, Spain, and crucially, the Ottoman Empire.
What they called the Levant, the East.
This changed everything for him. The sights, the smells, the clothing. He loved the Albanian costumes and the sexual freedom he found there. It was during this trip, in May 1810, that he performed his most famous physical feat.
The swim.
The swim across the Hellespont.
The strait that separates Europe from Asia. The Dardanelles.
Exactly. And the significance was literary. In Greek mythology, Leander swam the Hellespont every night to see his lover, Hero, until he drowned. Byron wanted to prove he could do what a mythic hero did.
It goes back to the foot.
It always goes back to the foot. He spent over an hour in that freezing, treacherous water fighting the current. When he made it to the Asian shore, he was exhausted but ecstatic. He bragged about it for the rest of his life.
He basically wrote home saying, I did what Leander did.
Yes, it was his way of saying, my foot might be deformed, but I am stronger than the sea. It was the ultimate act of physical overcompensation.
And he comes back to England in 1811, and he brings back a manuscript he's been scribbling, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage.
He gave it to his publisher, John Murray. It came out in March 1812.
Ah!
And the reaction was instantaneous.
As he himself later said.
I awoke one morning and found myself famous.
Let's dig into Childe Harold for a second. Why did it hit so hard? What was it about this poem that made people just lose their minds?
It captured the zeitgeist perfectly. Britain was tired of the war, tired of the old, rigid structures. And here comes a poem about a young, aristocratic man who is bored, disillusioned, wandering through exotic landscapes and thinking deep, dark thoughts.
It introduced the Byronic hero.
It did. And we hear that term in literature classes all the time.
So let's define it. What are the ingredients of a Byronic hero?
Okay, so think of a character who is immensely talented and passionate, but deeply flawed. He is disdainful of regular society and its rules. He's an exile or an outcast.
He's arrogant, cynical, moody.
Yes, but, and this is the key, he usually harbors a secret misery, a past sin that haunts him. He's the guy leaning against the wall at the party, looking like he hates everyone, which of course makes everyone want to talk to him.
Right. He's dangerous. And the public looked at the character of Childe Harold, and then they looked at Lord Byron and just decided they were the same person.
And Byron did not exactly discourage that, did he?
Not at all. He leaned into it hard. He curated his image like a modern Instagram influencer. He told painters, don't paint me sitting at a desk with books.
He wanted to be painted in Albanian dress or standing on a cliff looking wild. He practiced looking pale. He would go on these starvation diets of biscuits and soda water to maintain that gaunt, poetic look.
It's just masterful branding. But here is the thing that often gets lost because of the poetry and the posing. Byron was a politician.
A radical one at that.
He wasn't just sitting in the back of the House of Lords napping. His maiden speech was a defense of the Luddites.
Which is fascinating. People now think a Luddite is just someone who hates technology.
Oh, I'm such a Luddite, I can't use this new app.
Right, but historically, the Luddites were weavers in Nottinghamshire Byron's home turf who were starving because new industrial machinery was making their trade obsolete. They were breaking the machines in protest.
And the government wanted to make that a capital offense.
Death for breaking a loom. That was the proposal. And Byron, at 24 years old, stands up in the House of Lords and delivers this scorching speech.
He basically shames them.
He does. He mocks the value they placed on property over human life. He asks them, is there not blood enough upon your penal code?
That takes serious guts.
He was fierce, sarcastic, and genuinely compassionate toward the poor. He also supported Catholic emancipation, which was political suicide at the time. He was always questioning the consensus.
A contrarian, which is the polite word. But let's get to the part of the story that turns contrarian into social outcasts. The scandals start rolling in. And the biggest headline grabber has to be Lady Caroline Lamb.
Oh, this was the affair that really cemented his reputation. Lady Caroline was married to William Lamb, who would later become prime minister. She was eccentric, wild, brilliant.
And she's the one who gave us the famous quote.
She is. When she first saw Byron at a party, she refused an introduction and later wrote in her diary, mad, bad, and dangerous to know.
Which is just perfect irony because she immediately proceeded to get to know him very, very well.
She pursued him relentlessly. Their affair was brief, only a few months, but incredibly high voltage. When Byron tried to end it, she didn't take it well.
She became the world's first celebrity stalker.
Basically, yes. The stories are wild.
Yeah.
She dressed up as a page boy to try and break into his house.
Sent him clippings of her pubic hair.
Which was, a thing people did then, but usually in a loving context, not a stalking one. And then there's the famous Remember Me incident. She broke into his rooms, found a book on his desk, and wrote Remember Me on the title page.
And Byron, being Byron, wrote a poem back.
A brutal one. Remember thee, Till Lethe quench life's burning stream, remorse and shame shall cling to thee. And it ends with the line, thou false to him, thou fiend to me.
Thou fiend to me. That is a breakup text for the ages. But honestly, the Caroline Lamb drama was just noise, wasn't it? The real bomb, the one that destroyed his life in England, was much darker.
Much darker. We have to talk about Augusta Lee.
His half-sister.
Yes. They shared a father, Mad Jack, but had different mothers. They didn't grow up together, so they met essentially as strangers in adulthood. And Byron found in her a kindred spirit. She understood the madness.
But the relationship, it crossed the line.
Historical consensus is very strong on this. They became lovers. In a time when incest was not just a sin but a crime, this was nuclear.
And then Augusta had a daughter, Elizabeth Medora Lee.
And the timeline suggests, well, many believed then and now, that Medora was Byron's child.
And right in the middle of this swirling rumor mill, Byron makes the most baffling decision of his life.
He decides to get married to a very respectable woman.
Enter Annabella Milbank.
The Princess of Parallelograms, as he called her. She was a wealthy heiress, but she was serious, religious, and a gifted mathematician. The polar opposite of Byron.
It sounds like a bad rom-com setup. The bad boy marries the librarian, and she fixes him.
Except in real life, it was a horror movie. He married her, hoping to reform himself to stop the chaos. But he couldn't.
The honeymoon was a disaster.
A total disaster. He supposedly woke up screaming in the night. He was abusive, he brought looted pistols to bed, and he openly taunted her about his relationship with Augusta.
That is just psychological torture. I married you, but I'm obsessed with my sister.
Exactly. The marriage lasted 1 year. They had a daughter, Ada, and then Annabella fled. She took the baby and left.
And when the separation became public, the rumors exploded.
It wasn't just incest anymore. There were rumors of sodomy, which was a capital offense, and physical abuse. Byron was hissed at in the streets. Society doors slammed shut in his face.
Before we move him out of England, we have to mention that baby, Ada.
Ada Lovelace.
The mother of computer programming.
It's one of history's great ironies. Annabella raised Ada to be a mathematician, specifically to drive the Byron madness out of her. She didn't want her to be a poet.
And yet, Ada ended up working with Charles Babbage on the analytical engine. She wrote the first algorithm. She called it poetical science.
She used her father's imagination to envision the future of computing. And Byron never saw her again?
He left when she was just an infant.
Yes, he left England in April 1816 and never returned. He wrote about her constantly in his poetry, asked for portraits of her, but he died without ever seeing her again.
So, 1816, he's exiled, the most famous man in Europe, but he can't go home. He heads to Switzerland. And this summer, I mean, if you have a time machine, this is where you go.
The Villa Diodati, the haunted summer of 1816.
You have to set the scene. This isn't a normal summer.
Not at all. A massive volcano, Mount Tambora, had erupted in Indonesia the year before. It threw so much ash into the atmosphere that it disrupted the global climate. 1816 was known as the year without a summer.
So it's July, but it's dark, cold, and raining constantly.
Exactly. It was gloomy and gothic. Byron rents this villa by Lake Geneva. He has his personal physician with him, a young man named John Polidori.
And living nearby is another group of exiles.
The poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, his lover Mary Godwin, soon to be Mary Shelley, and her stepsister, Claire Claremont.
And Claire has her own agenda.
Claire had practically forced herself on Byron in London. She was pregnant with his child, Allegra. He wasn't particularly interested in her, but she followed him. So you have this pressure cooker. The rain, the sexual tension, the intellectual rivalry.
And to pass the time, they read ghost stories.
And one night, Byron suggests, we will each write a ghost story.
He throws down a challenge.
And the results of that challenge changed literature forever. Mary Shelley, who was only 18, has this waking nightmare about a reanimated corpse. She begins writing Frankenstein.
Which is still the ultimate sci-fi horror myth.
But people forget the other masterpiece born that summer. Byron wrote a fragment of a story, which he abandoned. But his doctor, Polidori, took that idea and expanded it into a novella called The Vampire.
We need to talk about Polidori. He's sort of the tragic side character in the Byron show.
He is. He was young, ambitious, desperate for Byron's approval. But Byron was cruel to him. He mocked Polidori's writing, mocked his jealousy.
So the vampire was revenge.
In a way, yes. He based the villain, Lord Ruthven, on Byron.
No way. The first modern vampire was a diss track.
It really was. Before this, vampires in folklore were peasant ghouls, bloated, dirty corpses. Polidori made the vampire an aristocrat, charming, rich, seductive, but draining the life out of everyone around him.
That is Byron.
That's Byron. Every vampire from Dracula to Twilight owes its DNA to Byron's personality.
So he created the rock star and the vampire. That is quite a resume.
Is.
After Switzerland, the group breaks up, and Byron heads to Italy. And if we thought the Barrett Cambridge was wild, his life in Venice is next level.
He settles in Venice at the Plaza Mochedigo, and he just lets go. He plunges into debauchery, but he also turns his home into a zoo.
The menagerie. I have the list here from a letter Shelley wrote when he visited. 10 horses, 8 enormous dogs, 3 monkeys, 5 cats, an eagle, a crow, and a falcon.
And they weren't in cages. Shelley describes them wandering up and down the grand staircase. He said the house resounded with their unarbitrated quarrels.
Can you imagine trying to have a serious literary conversation while a monkey is fighting a falcon in the hallway?
It sounds chaotic, but also maybe a bit lonely, like he was surrounding himself with life because he felt exiled from humanity.
There's probably truth to that, but amidst the chaos, he was writing his masterpiece, Don Juan. And the tone shift here is important.
Very. Childe Harold was moody and serious. Don Juan is hilarious. It's a satire. He stops taking himself so seriously and starts mocking everyone else.
He goes after the other poets, right?
Brutally. He calls the poet laureate William Wordsworth.
Turdsworth.
Turdsworth. Very mature, George.
He was lashing out at the British establishment that had rejected him. But he also found a new kind of stability in his personal life, after a string of chaotic affairs, including one with a baker's wife who threw herself into the canal when he tried to break up with her.
Yes, that one. After that, he met Teresa Guccioli.
The last attachment.
She was a young Italian countess married to an older man. She fell in love with Byron, and surprisingly, he settled down with her. He became part of her family. It was the closest he ever came to a domestic marriage, even though it was an adulterous affair.
And during this time, he does something completely unexpected. He learns Armenian.
This is a fascinating detour. He would row out to the monastery of San Lazzaro in Venice to study with the monks. He helped them compile an English-Armenian dictionary.
Why?
He told his friends he needed something craggy to break his mind upon. It shows that his brain was always hungry. He couldn't just sit still. If he wasn't conquering a woman or a mountain, he had to conquer a difficult language.
But eventually, even the monkeys and the countess and the grammar books weren't enough. He got bored.
Byron was terrified of stagnation. He felt he was getting old. He was only in his mid-30s, and he felt like he was just a scribbler. He wanted to do something real, something noble.
And then the Greeks revolt against the Ottoman Empire.
The Greek War of Independence. This was the cause he had been waiting for. Byron loved Greece from his youth. He saw it as the cradle of civilization being crushed by tyranny. So he decides to go all in.
And he didn't just, change his profile picture to a Greek flag. He put his money where his mouth was.
Huge amounts of money. He sold his estate at Rochdale. He had about 20,000 pounds in liquid cash to spend on the cause. In 1823, that is a staggering fortune. He basically funded the Greek fleet personally.
So he goes to Missolonghi in 1824. He expects, I think, a romantic battle. He wants to charge in on a white horse.
And that's not what he gets.
No.
Reality hit him hard. Missolonghi was a dismal, swampy town. It was raining constantly. And the Greeks were not a unified army of heroes. They were factionalized tribes fighting each other.
So he's mediating arguments instead of fighting Turks.
Exactly. And he hired this private army, the Suliotes. They were famed warriors. But as mercenaries, they were a nightmare. They constantly demanded more pay. They threatened him. At one point, Byron wrote that he would rather cut myself into pieces than deal with them anymore.
He was stressed, exhausted, and disillusioned, and physically deteriorating.
He was. He planned an attack on the fortress of Lepanto. This was going to be his moment.
But he never got to the battlefield.
Never. In February 1824, he had a seizure. He recovered, but he was weak. Then in April, he went out riding and got caught in a torrential downpour. He collapsed with a fever.
And this is where the tragedy of 19th century medicine comes in.
The doctors. His doctors believed in therapeutic bleeding. They thought the fever was caused by inflammation of the blood, so they applied leeches. They bled him.
They drained the blood out of a man who was already fighting an infection.
They took pounds of blood over several days. Byron actually resisted at first, calling them a damn set of butchers, but eventually he was too weak to fight them off.
So they essentially bled him to death. That's horrifying.
On April 19th, 1824, amidst a violent thunderstorm, George Gordon Byron died. He was 36 years old.
36. That's just painfully young. But the reaction, he didn't die in battle, but he died for the cause.
Exactly. The news shocked the world. In Greece, the grief was total. He was proclaimed a national hero. To this day, there are statues of him in Greek towns. There's a suburb of Athens called Varonis.
They don't care about his scandals. They care that he showed up.
He came to help when no one else would. But then we get this macabre postscript with the body.
The Greeks wanted to bury him in Athens. The English wanted him back.
So a grisly compromise was reached. Reportedly, his lungs and larynx were removed and buried in Missolonghi. The rest of his body was embalmed, pickled in a cask of spirits, and shipped to London.
And when the cask arrives, you'd expect a hero's welcome. Burial in Westminster Abbey, right?
You would think. But the Dean of Westminster Abbey refused. He said Byron's questionable morality made him unfit for burial in the church.
Even in death, he was too scandalous. So where is he?
He was buried in the family vault at a small church in Hucknall Torkard, near Newstead Abbey. It wasn't until 1969, 145 years later, that Westminster Abbey finally relented and put up a memorial stone in Poets' Corner.
Talk about holding a grudge. But to me, the biggest tragedy isn't the burial. It's the memoirs.
This is a dagger to the heart of any historian. Byron had written his autobiography. He gave the manuscript to his friend Thomas More. He contained everything: his side of the marriage, the truth about Augusta, the names of his lovers.
And what happened to it?
After Byron died, his friends panicked. Thomas More, John Cam Hobhouse, and Byron's publisher John Murray gathered in Murray's office in London. They read it, and they decided it was too damaging to his reputation, and maybe to theirs.
So they protected his reputation by destroying his voice.
They tore it up and threw the pages into the fireplace. They watched Byron's life story burn. It is considered the greatest single loss in British literature. We will never know exactly what he had to say for himself.
That is just devastating. We're left with the letters and the poems, but the man's own defense is gone forever.
It leaves him as an enigma. And perhaps he would have liked that.
So let's wrap this up. What does this all mean? We have a man who was just a walking contradiction. He was vain but insecure. He was a snob who fought for the poor, a mad libertine who gave his life for freedom.
I think Byron represents the struggle between the ideal and the real. He wrote about these perfect, moody heroes, but his real life was messy, funny, and tragic. He proved that you can be deeply flawed and still do something heroic.
If he lived today, I always wonder what he would be. Would he be a statesman? A rock star?
I think he would be the most controversial figure on the internet. He'd be canceled every Tuesday for saying something offensive, and then he would drop an album or a book on Friday that everyone would buy.
He'd be completely unmanageable.
Totally. And maybe that is the definition of Byronic. You cannot separate the art from the mess, because the mess is the art.
Well, on that note, we're going to leave the limping devil to his rest. From the bear at Cambridge to the looches in Greece, it has been a wild ride. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into Lord Byron.